Processes and Systems, Chapter 7, is where our discussion starts today. In a business setting, you need to be able to pull together processes and systems. I want to explain what that means, but there are some elements that we think best describe processes and systems. Governance is one of those. Business process management is another. Critical thinking is the third. Fact gathering is the fourth. And last but not least, Kaizen, which we'll go into explain each one of these. So let's start with defining the process. So let's use an example of a student that is actually going to school. So this process represents a student that goes to school, attends classes, which is the next step in the process, finds themselves studying and completing some of the work or homework that's been assigned. And then the final step is they acquire knowledge, and then there's a grade assessment. So that gives us a framework for what a process looks like. Now let's take that same example a step further, and let's look at this successful student and the system that supports them. And then within that system, there's a quality subject content that's necessary. There are administrators and managers that support the organization on a consistent basis. There's a physical, emotional, and even spiritual health that's necessary in order to continue to allow the system to operate and function. There's a personal commitment to learning necessary from the student's perspective, as well as transportation, getting from point A to point B. There's student learning tools that come into this equation, as well as instructor or teaching tools that are necessary. There's also functional facilities available so that technology, resources, any tools that are being used can do so in order to help this student be more successful. And then there's a healthy school nutrition for health that's extremely important. So this kind of defines the system that the student may operate within. From there, we can start to look at defining information and governance. And so there are roles that people have within information and governance. And these are defined responsibilities. They fill tasks and behaviors within the position of an organization. There are processes that we led to. So a process could be within a system and also within information and governance, but the process is a string of activities designed to kind of meet the goals. There are controls put in place to make sure that we manage conflict and we build positive relationships on a long-term basis. And then we have to be able to measure what we're doing. So we put metrics in place in order to help us do that, to compare the actual output to the goal that was put in front of us as an objective. So when we define the business process management, what we're looking at is there are models put in place for success. And these models serve as a resource for needs and expectations that we put into the process and system framework. Implementation is important. The ability to approach things where you can analyze, design, and support the workflow within your organization. Management is extremely important. We're looking at taking the resources and then trying to create these successful workflow pathways. And then refinement, the retooling of what we do, the ability to be able to assess the outcomes and then communicate success to encourage critical assessment later on in this process. So when we look at critical thinking, there's an approach that we take to define or help us understand critical thinking. That approach encompasses being open-minded as well as being able to predictably look at things from a sequential standpoint, but not necessarily all of the content that we're operating with. We can create a path in that, and we can test our conclusions as well as incorporate the thought necessary to keep critical thinking within our organization. This then provides us with opportunity and then puts us in a position to consistently evolve. So as a result of that, we can expect that we will be able to kind of mitigate bias because we've incorporated and defined critical thinking in our organization. We can cultivate a pattern of logic, which is extremely important, and then reassess some of our outcomes so that then we put ourselves in a position to expose any assumptions that might exist. This allows us to challenge resolution and then at the same time have this inclusive communication structure that really makes people feel good about the fact that the organization that they're in is constantly improving. Now, let's look at fact gathering, which is a basis for research and specifically get fact gathering for decisions. And when we look at it, we need to be able to identify challenges, have statements of need, conduct a need analysis and a query, and then consider the solutions that ultimately give us the decision that we would have. And let's use now a different example. Let's use an example of an office space that we've outgrown, which is to identify the challenge. And then we need more space, which is the statement of need. And then we implement fact gathering, which is the need analysis. The query for a solution starts by asking questions. How do we use the current space? How might we change the way we use the space? What are the costs associated, the risk, the tools, the resources, the maintenance involved with utilizing the space? And then formulate our solutions, consider them, and then ultimately put ourselves in a position to make a decision. When we look to define Kaizen and how it works, it's actually quite simple, yet it takes some work to be able to put this into the whole equation around processes and systems. Kaizen is nothing more than change for the better that is constant improvement. So one must go on a fact finding journey through their own personal experiences to understand Kaizen and the five S's. Sairi, which is organization, Seitan, which is orderliness, Seiso, which is cleanliness, Seiketsu, which is standards, and Shitsuzuki, which is discipline. And so, what you're looking for is to bring these five elements into Kaizen and make these constant improvements and steps moving forward on a consistent basis. Here are some definitions that might be beneficial for you when you're starting to look at how processes and systems work in today's workplace. And I think it's important to note that even though we've chosen these, there are many other ways to look at processes and systems in today's workplace and in today's marketplace. We've just happened to choose these. So, what did we learn today? We learned that a process and a system, although they work together, are completely different. We learned that critical thinking is about clear, concise, and accurate information, and fact gathering is more the impetus or the start for research. And then Kaizen is how we take these small incremental steps over time that help us toward improvement ultimately in our organization and in our systems and processes. Here is your thought for the day. Stay motivated.